Okay, so this morning I showed you guys how we did the pulling the honey out of the hives, and this afternoon decided we would go ahead and show you how we actually extract the honey. So what we got here is we've got honey that's in the frames. You can see these are the ones that we pulled out earlier today. And then what we have here is this is called a decapping table. If you look inside, you'll see that we have the cappings. What I'll do here is I'm going to cut the cappings off this frame. The cappings fall into this bin, and then if there's any honey still attached to it, it'll go through the bottom down here. It's like a sieve. Then if you look over here to the right, you'll see that some honey has built up there in the bottom. Once enough honey builds up in the bottom, we open a drain on the end, and then we can drain that into a bucket. So first thing we're going to do here is we're going to take some of this honey, and we're going to pull the cappings off of it. So put it up here on the top, and use just a regular butter knife. All we do is we just cut. You'll see this upward motion, and it's actually cutting just the cap, just the very top of the cap off the honey. You just got to go real easy with it as you're working it back and forth. You can see the honey's already starting to run out. Come down, rotate it around. You can see here they didn't even put any honey in there yet, but this is capped honey here, so I'm going to start at the bottom, and we're just going to cut the top.
And why do you want capped honey?
So honey that's capped has the right moisture content. If the moisture is too high, that means the bees haven't fully processed it. And if the moisture content's too high, it'll actually start it to ferment after a while. And then the higher the moisture content, the more fermentation that happens. Now, any of these that I missed, little holes, I'm looking for cells like up here. I'm just going to go through and just make sure I scrape those, because the cells have to be opened for the honey to come out. But I'm trying not to completely damage the wax, because I want them to reuse the wax. Now I'm going to take the wax, I'm going to put it over here into the extractor. You can look in the extractor if you want. You can see we're looking into the extractor here. You can see that they sit in here readily. I'm going to do one more, and then we'll fire up the extractor. Okay.
And the capping, what's the capping?
The capping is the wax. It's just wax on top. There's nothing fancy about it. But it's the wax that kind of seals the cell once the honey's in there. And the bees only seal it when when the wax is to the right moisture content. So I'm going to come again. Just cut the next one. Now we take this wax when we're done with it. After all the honey's dribbled out of it, then we'll take that and we'll wash this wax and we'll purify it down, and then we'll be able to make lip balms and candles and things from it. If you look here, you can see that there's a little bit different color wax. We have some white wax and then some darker wax that's here. The white wax is what we call our cappings wax, and the darker wax has probably had something, maybe one of the actual bees, the queen may have laid an egg in there, or it's some bird comb to the side. And we'll see. You can see down here, this is probably where some bees were actually laid at one point, but then once they hatched, they filled them with honey. So, and then they capped it. It's quite common to find that in the hive. Same thing right in here. You'll see that that's what it was. I'm just knocking these cappings open here, the ones that got missed, with my knife, making sure it's all open. Okay. The next one's going to go in. Sliding that in. Okay. You want to look over here, you can see. Pull my glove off for a minute so we can. I'm going to turn the extractor on. You can look inside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to slowly increase the speed. And you'll start to see that it's going to start turning. So when it's full and heavy, we want it to turn really slow. And then you'll notice here on the side, you're going to start noticing, I don't know if you can see it, but you'll start to see stuff flying out as it starts getting faster.
And the stuff that's flying out is?
That's honey. So you'll see spots of honey as it's flying out now, as it's picking up speed. So what we want to do is we want to run the extractor. So what's going to happen is all that honey flies out, and then it runs to the bottom of the extractor. Once it runs to the bottom of the extractor, then we'll be able to pour it off into a bucket. So right now, the smell that's coming out of the extractor is a lot of honey smell. You can really smell the honey because there's a lot of wind coming out of it. Turn it down a little bit. So you always need to watch the speed on these because there's a lot of weight in here. There's about 150 pounds of honey spinning around inside this extractor right now. So we don't want to turn it up too high or it'll be just like a washing machine walking across the floor.
Now, does every beekeeper have one of these?
So all beekeepers are going to use some form of an extractor to get their stuff out. This is a motor, one with a motor on it. A lot of times smaller operations are going to have smaller extractors, ones that maybe only hold 2 to 4 frames. And then as you get larger, you're going to invest more money. This one holds 20 frames. The larger operations can hold 32, 64 frames at a time. They become massive tubs. So as the starts to pop out, we'll just go ahead and increase the speed a little bit.
Do they all have motors?
The smaller ones do not have motors. They're hand crank. And we'll just let this run for a while. So while that's running, what we do here, we're going to go ahead and we'll do a few more of these. Give it some time. So it's one of the nice things about having one of these capping tables, as it's called, is you can actually come and continue pulling the cappings off while the extractor runs. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the next frame. So pull the next frame out. You can see that's all capped honey on both sides. Take the bread knife. We're just going to cut it off.
Do you always start at the bottom?
I do always start at the bottom. It's just a technique that I've come up with. Some people have electric capping knives, but I come up from the bottom and you'll see I angle it as well. The angle allows it to fall off, but you can see that's, if you look in there, you can see the perfect honey in there. This one, it's a little bit lower than the wood, so I have to come in with the scratcher to get those. Just make sure that the cells get knocked open. Okay, I'm going to turn it around and just get the cells here on the side.
And why do you want to keep the comb undamaged?
Well, you don't want the comb to be damaged because, and then we're just going to slide this one in here while we get ready for the next one. Because next year we'll save the comb on these frames, and next year the bees will be able to fill it back up. They can fill a cone, so 2 of these big boxes in the peak season, they can fill 2 of these boxes a week. But if they had to build the comb for it, it could take them almost 2.5 to 3 weeks to build out the comb for it. It takes 8 pounds of honey to make 1 pound of wax. So it takes a lot of energy they have to use to make this wax. So we want to conserve the wax as much as possible. That's why you see me only taking the cappings. If I wanted to, I could brush the whole thing and get it going, but we want to make it as easy as possible for the bees next year. Okay, we'll do a couple more and then we'll see how the extractor's going. Usually you want to let the extractor run for a few minutes. You can take a look if you want and see how it's still, see if it's still flying out over there. See any coming to the side?
Yes.
Okay. So as it's still coming to the side, that means it's still extracting. So this one here didn't have much going on. For comb, they actually made the cells very small. So
What's that dark thing?
So that's a piece of pollen in there that they've stored in there. Wouldn't hurt you at all. But they usually store their pollen by itself or down in the main part of the hive. But every once in a while they'll come and they'll have a few spots of it up in the top. But it won't hurt you at all if you get some pollen in you.
Now, why do you have to pry them apart?
They get pried apart because if you look here, you'll see this gooey kind of bubblegum type stuff. That's called propolis. And it's actually made from tree saps and other things. And they use it to weld the hive together to close out all the holes, keep the draft out, keep bugs and insects out that they don't want in there. You know, your ants and things like that. It also can be used as a kind of an antiseptic for them. So if a tree was to get injured, a tree would let the sap or gum come out, you know, and it'd heal itself. Well, in the same case, those same properties that heal the tree are actually good to help heal the bees. So, scrape this off.
No, those were lower.
Yeah, they were lower than the actual, so I couldn't cut them. Sometimes they, like this one's really low. Sometimes they'll build them out, and honestly, it's the beekeeper that controls some of that stuff. When you put the frames in, there's a space here. If you see, there's a certain amount of gap in between them. That's called bee space, and if it's not perfect, they may make it lower or higher. So an example here. If that one was just low, here's one. Here's one that's really on the high side. You can see how they went way over the top with that one. You also see that this one isn't capped yet. So they started capping over here, but they haven't made their way across yet. And then on this side, it's fully capped. Most likely this honey is going to be just fine as far as ready to go. And especially since we're going to be mixing it in with the other ones, there won't be any issues with the moisture content on it. So, but we will check it before we bottle. We do check the moisture content of all the honey. So you'll see, when it's high, it cuts right off without any problems. Now this one I've got to be careful. While it's high, the cells are weaker when they don't have capping on them. So I'll cut that extra top piece off. You can see the piece of comb came off. Scratch it. When we scratch this, and we'll take a look at how things are going over there at the extractor real quick. Okay. You put this in here, and if you look in here, all that honey down there is dripping out of the bottom of these frames, and then it's getting caught into this stainless steel tub here. See how things are going. I'm going to turn it up just a hair. So I'm increasing the speed just a little bit. And then what I'm going to do here, so we've just done that honey. So down here, if you look at the bottom, even while this is running, we can go ahead and let some of this honey out. So I'm going to open up the valve here. What it's going to do when I open this valve, it's going to go through, let me show you this real quick. We've got a kind of a double sift here. First one's kind of like a screen to keep the bugs out. That's going to catch large chunks of wax and stuff. And then we've got a much thinner one here, and this is going to catch the bee legs and things like that might have gotten through this first strainer. So this is all we do. We run it through these things right here, and then it'll be ready straight for the bottle. So I'm going to open it up, loosen it up a little bit, open it up. You can see the honey's coming right out. They'll be small. If you look carefully, you can see there's small chunks of wax in there. Those small chunks of wax will be filtered out, and then what goes down into the bucket will be pure honey. So tomorrow, this exact honey, I'm going to let it set through the night, And then tomorrow morning, I'm going to get up really early and I'm going to bottle this so that we can have it tomorrow at the farmer's market. Slow it down a little bit.
What farmer's market?
The Uptown Ankeny Farmer's Market. We're there every Saturday from 8 to noon.
So fresh, raw, local honey. And how many more of these do you have to do
So
this year?
this box that's like this, we've got about 60 of those boxes that we've got to do this year. So it'll take quite a while. The extractor will hold 2 of these boxes at a time. 2 at a time. And once they're done, then we'll take them out of the extractor. We'll put them back in the box. Then we'll put them back on the beehive. And the bees will take any little piece. You can see the propolis on these boxes that have been built up as they weld everything together. But they will, they'll take take what's left of the honey out of there. They'll repair all the cells, and then we'll leave it on there for about a couple days, and then we'll pull them back off. We'll put them in the freezer. We'll freeze them for a few days to make sure if there are any bugs or anything in there, they're frozen. Then we'll seal them up and seal them for the winter. So, okay, this is still turning. We're going to let that continue to turn. We're going to continue to let more honey run out of there. But it's just a continuous process.
And then from the capping, our new molds of the year. All right, ready to say goodbye?
Yep, goodbye. We'll see you tomorrow.